Hello my kings, queens, and friends, my leaders, and welcome back to Nakama. I'm so happy to see you here again. We continue with another BokuAkaKuroKen Omega vs. AU. I have written a lot of Omega vs. AUs lately. There's a reason for that. I'll get to that in a second. But besides that, also my channel members decided that this should be next. And by decided, I mean it was actually a tie this time. And so I decided this should be next. But don't worry, the Atsume ex-boyfriend storyline, as you can see, will come very soon. Now, let's get started with this. I hope you enjoy it. Akaashi felt a little awkward putting the tests on the counter. Even more so because the scent patches on each side of his neck covering his main scent glands could barely contain his excitement. His expression was as stoic as usual, but his scent betrayed him. It was an annoyingly common occurrence that got worse over time, though his heart beat a little bit better remembering that his mates loved it. In high school, when he and Kuroo had just started dating, the alpha was almost skittish around him. It took him a while to figure out that it was because he couldn't read his emotions on his face like with most people. Akaashi wasn't expressive like others. He didn't actively thought to change that beyond offering more small smiles and gestures when it was just the two of them, but the more serious their relationship got, the more comfortable did the Omega feel around him. Without even noticing it, he let his instincts roam more freely in Kuroo's presence, including his scent. They had fallen into an easy rhythm, and took the challenges of transitioning into adulthood with grace. One of them more than the other, but in the end, they both made it. It was during a calm evening on the couch. Akaashi had been upset with something he didn't care to remember, and too tired to do the sensible thing and communicate his discomfort. Yet, without preamble, Bokuto did everything perfectly, offering all he could to make him feel better. They hadn't even been mated yet, and it was that small detail that set him off. He remembered Bokuto's previous struggles to read him, even though he did so now flawlessly, and suddenly, not knowing what had changed, irked him. Simply falling into a rhythm seemed too insufficient an explanation. Bokuto looked at him puzzled when he asked, fussing over him even more as the Omega appeared distressed. Then, as though it was obvious, he nuzzled at his neck, explaining that his scent gave it away. Before Akaashi could stress about how he didn't even notice that he had lost control over it, the alpha reassured him. I like it. It only happens when you're close to me or Kemma. It's like you say we are pack, and this way, I know when to help you. He had relaxed at that. Maybe he didn't need to control everything. They had made their relationship with Tetsuro and Kemma a slowly over the years building thing, official not much longer afterwards. Apparently, pack wasn't quite a sufficient word his inner Omega had in mind, and with Akaashi being more open around the four of them, his scent had left little space for doubt about the sincerity of his agreement once the relationship was suggested. He couldn't believe how far they had come. The bag in his hand felt heavier than it should, considering he only bought 4 pregnancy tests, wrapped in their little carton boxes. He thought 4 would likely be enough. It had only been 3 weeks by now, and the accuracy rate was still low. He'd do 1 and keep the others for later. Unless it was positive, of course. He hoped it'd be. Then he could give the rest to Kemma, considering that he also hadn't acted safely during their shared heat. His risk was a little lower than Akaashi's, given that his heat was induced rather than coming naturally through a cycle. There was no guarantee his body could have provided a fertile egg in time. Still, it was better to be prepared. He unlocked the door to the house quickly, habitually checking through the bond for his mates in the close vicinity, but the sensation at his neck remained dulled. Of course, Kuroo was on a trip with Atsumiya to his brother's restaurant, with the promise to bring back plenty of onigiri for Akaashi. Tetsuro was still at work, and Kemma had taken the chance that MSBY had an off day to visit Hinata. Akaashi was alone. He stepped inside, following his usual routine, until everything was put away and he approached the stairs to the upstairs bathroom. He was suddenly nervous, his heart beat in his chest to the rhythm of the hummingbird wings caged by his ribs. His hands were shaking as he opened the first box. He forced them to still till he could read the instructions. The test promised up to 70% accuracy at the 2 to 3 weeks mark, and Akaashi counted on that. He followed the instructions, set the timer, and waited. It was almost agonizing seeing the seconds tick by. He knew his timing wasn't good. Not only was it too early for an accurate result, but even if it was positive now, miscarriages were increasingly common in the first couple of weeks. He knew that no matter the result, he would be more stressed than if he had never touched the test, but he couldn't help it. His mates being absent was just the icing on the cake, though it was by design. He didn't want them to go through the same anxiety he forced himself through right now, or the disappointment if it didn't work. If he was foolish enough to do this early, he could carry the consequences of that decision. When a soft ringing announced that the time was up, Akaashi startled and jumped up, but then hesitated when actually reaching for the test. He took a deep breath, turned it around, and his heart sank. Negative. He stood frozen for a few seconds until he noticed that his scent was beginning to sour. If he let his emotions run any more wild, his mates would sense it regardless of distance. He didn't need that adding to everything right now. They would just tell him what he already knew and currently tried reminding himself of. It was still extremely early. The result likely wasn't accurate. The 70% accuracy on the packaging seemed to glare at him right next to the up to 95% accuracy for the 4 to 5 week mark. He tried reassuring himself that he was still in the former time frame, but didn't that mean regardless that it was more likely than not that it hadn't taken? Quickly he threw the test away and hid the others, angry with himself for getting so worked up over this. When he looked in the mirror, his eyes were red-rimmed and glossy. He quickly wiped over them to rid himself of tears that would be just a waste on nothing. Leaning over the sink, he took a deep breath to catch himself. This was stupid. He let the reminders run over and over in his mind, trying to reason himself out of this. Slowly his breathing evened out. He quickly removed the scent patches now drenched in the bitter pheromones. With a disinfectant wipe, he cleaned the irritated skin above his glands and reapplied patches, including to his wrists this time. It was a little overkill, but he didn't care. He didn't want the scent leaking through. Eventually, as he distracted himself with chores, he calmed, though his movements were still rigid, almost mechanical. He was so engrossed in it that he didn't notice something had changed until the front door closed again with a click. One quick check of their bond told him that Kuroo was home. He bit the inside of his cheek in anxiety. He hadn't prepared, and was now trying rapidly to harness his emotions.
Keiji?
Over here. He replied a little too quickly. There was an unmistakable crack to his voice, though the Omega tried disguising it with a cough. Still, he wasn't blind. Kuroo's smile was warm as usual, but something in his eyes had shifted. Akaashi knew that he knew that something was wrong.
Hey, are you okay? How's your day been?
The deep tone of his voice resonated soothingly in Akaashi's chest, urging him to tell his mate everything. His tone was casual, though laced with genuine interest. The Omega forced a small smile, but didn't meet his eyes directly. Nothing special. I didn't have much to do besides cleaning and buying some groceries. Kuroo hummed noncommittedly as he walked up to him, his eyes slowly narrowing. He looked almost anxious, and when Akaashi tried to figure out why through their bond, he knew instantly. He had blocked their bond subconsciously. Of course his mate would be anxious. It was a dead giveaway that something was wrong. Very wrong. His movements faltered and he looked down. A sting of shame rushed through him. First, he couldn't control his emotions over something so silly, and now he was blocking them out childishly so that they wouldn't notice how incompetent he was, making them worry regardless. Gentle fingers took hold of his hand and lifted it towards Kuroo. He caressed the back of it gently with his thumb, his frown deepening as he turned it and found the sand patches on his wrist.
Keiji.
It went unanswered.
Love, please don't hide. If something is wrong, I want to help.
He pulled him a little closer and Akaashi let him. He craved the closeness, needed to be enveloped in the soothing pheromones of his alpha, although he didn't think he deserved it.
You can't.
His words were just barely above a whisper, and then suddenly a sob lodged itself from his throat. Immediately, Kuroo's arms closed around him and he held him tightly to his chest. His hand found its way into the raven curls, and he soothingly scratched over his scalp. A low hum resonated in Kuroo's chest and formed a melody with his heartbeat that could have lulled the Omega to sleep under different circumstances. He hiccuped, and his breath staggered as he tried catching them. The swallow felt so pathetic to fall apart to this degree over a test result. Why couldn't he control himself? Stop it, just breathe. But it was no use. The more he chastised himself for it, the more he felt like crying. Only Tetsuo's presence served to anchor him. He didn't shush him or even tried stopping the tears. He was just there, his touch soft and gentle and his voice soothing and filled with reassurance, while calming pheromones released from his neck and wrists. He could control his emotions for his mate's sake, Akaashi thought bitterly, as he tried again to catch himself before the next sob clawed itself free.
It's okay. Take your time.
Kuroo was very familiar with Keiji's need for control. The Omega hated when he lost autonomy in one way or another, especially if he failed to regulate himself. He was too harsh on himself. All the compassion he offered others in accommodating their needs fell short when it was about him. The Alpha rocked them gently, making soothing his Omega his single focus point. He would worry about what got them here after Akaashi felt better. He doubted the other would be able to explain now anyway. Slowly, bit by bit, the Omega calmed. His tears became more silent, the sobs came less frequent, and his shaking subsided to the occasional shudder. Kuroo rubbed over his back and pulled him tighter once more before slowly separating them. For a few seconds, Akaashi chased after the touch until he seemed to think better of it. The Alpha hated it. He could see in his eyes how the Omega denied himself comfort, likely in a misguided attempt to shoulder blame where there was none. His hand lingered on Keiji's in a silent offer, but the Omega shook his head and let it drop. As soon as the touch broke, tension returned to his back, and he took a shuddered breath. I took a test. It was negative. A fresh tear fell from his eye, and he quickly wiped it away with his sleeve as if annoyed by it. A spark of anger flared in his eyes, and he let out a small growl. I know this is stupid. It was way too early, but it said it was 70% accurate, and now I think I failed again. It's so unfair. His voice broke, and the growl returned, growing in intensity as he wiped at his face uselessly. All Kuroo could do was watch helplessly. I know I shouldn't be crying over this. It's so stupid.
Keiji, no. It's not stupid. It's not.
Giving the Omega space had never been so hard.
Love, we really want this and are hoping for it to work, so of course this would be disappointing, early or not. Sure, it might be wrong, and we'll hold out hope for that, but that doesn't mean you aren't allowed to grieve the result you got now.
The teal-colored eyes found his, and soon they were overflowing once more, and despite his best attempts to suppress it, the sob broke through. The scent patches couldn't hold the now soured scent of lilac anymore, and Kuroo's heart broke as it reached him. A whine escaped his throat, and he'd give everything to reach out and take Akaashi in his arms again. He didn't know how yet, but he'd protect him from everything and anything making him sad. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I
I want to give us hugs. What? No, don't apologize. You will. You are doing great. We have just started, and as you said, it's likely too early to tell. He looked at Akaashi pleadingly, unsure what he was even asking for, but the words seemed to form on their own. Please, Keiji, let us, carry this together. You're not doing this alone. You are willing to take on a great burden for all of us, so please, let us help where we can. The Omega went silent for a long moment. Then, barely loud enough to hear, he spoke. What if I can't? Kuroo froze. His immediate response was that it was too early to worry about that. It had been only 2 heats and the time in between, yet he bit his tongue. He took a deep breath before answering calmly. Then we'll find other ways. No matter how, I love the family we'll make. I already do. Akaashi nodded slowly, though his silent tears hadn't ceased. I don't want to find other ways. You won't have to. We'll try until it takes. The smaller lifted his arms hesitantly into Kuroo's direction, and within seconds the alpha had wrapped him in his embrace again. He pressed a kiss to his temple and drank in his heavy scent, sharing in his pain and fear. Carefully he lifted him into his arms and carried him to their nest. His alpha calmed a little, seeing him safe and sound in their den, far away from any harm that could come to him. Yet, in his distress, it felt incomplete without the other mates, and he yearned for Bokuto's presence to stabilize them both. He was surprisingly adept when someone was in emotional distress. Kuroo wanted to hide in his arms just until he felt a little bit more grounded again, though until the Alpha and Omega would return to them, he'd make sure to keep Keiji safe, no matter what. Thank you also so much for watching till the end. I really hope you enjoyed this. Don't forget to leave a like and subscribe if you did. And yeah, please, by all means, tell me your thoughts in the comments. And if you mind the Omega verses that I'm writing so much recently, a lot of that is just spontaneous motivation and the writing bug biting me. And to be honest, I really struggled recently and I felt scared a lot. And seeing that at least the characters I love so much getting the comfort that they need is very, very reassuring. And I really appreciate that. Yeah, a special thanks to my Nairuru who helped me decide which videos to make next and who get this video already I think 2 weeks this time in advance. If that sounds interesting to you as well, feel free to check out the join button under this video. Here are my other social media. I'm not very active on there, but also I don't think my Twitter account exists anymore, I just realized. But yeah, here's my content. Enjoy!
Wake up, today's gonna be a good day. 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 Wake up, today's gonna be a good day.